Talking about horses, bringing you closer to some of the best horsemen in the world for tips, insights, and stories. Listen at home, at work, in the car, or in the saddle. This is Talking About Horses. Here's your host, Patrick King.
Want to thank you so much to everybody for tuning in for another episode here with Talking About Horses. I'm here with Charles de Kunffy. In the world of dressage and classical horsemanship, Charles is somebody who needs no introduction. You've heard Charles and I chatting several times through broadcasts and podcasts in the past. And Charles, thank you so much for again agreeing to come on here and chat with me and my audience.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm always gratified when I have any chance to address riding as science and an academic thing like a theory session. So this is very much to my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation now.
Perfect.
So I think that the topic is so complex and so enormous that one has to first explain that we can only talk about principles. There are principles of horsemanship, principles of dressage, classical inherited principles of centuries of trial and error and understanding slowly and more by millions of riding people contributing of their experiences, and we came to an enormous body of knowledge through centuries, and this is of course why we can only talk about it in principles, in the hope that then the details can be worked out by mentoring and guiding and teaching and inspiring, etc., but on still paying full attention to the essential knowledge and great wealth of knowledge of 2,000 years of experiences. So classical horsemanship doesn't need to be invented. It needs to be learned and diligently followed and humbly followed, because that is the only hope we have for the survival of this great art and tradition, because it is, of course, a performing art, and with a performing art, it survives only as long as the performances are valid. Yeah. If they start to derail and ruin the tradition and refuse to understand that something that's called classical is called classical because it survives its utility, it survives its usefulness for thousands of years or hundreds of years. And this is what we are talking about today. And so it's always a feeling for me that we sin by omission, not by commission when we talk about horses, because what I can say in a few minutes today doesn't substitute a lifelong learning in academies with formal instruction, and then on the field with actually practicing the art of what you have learned in the academy. Now you not only display it, but hand it over to a new generation of applicants who find it very important for them to learn this and to continue with the tradition. So first of all, when we talk about principles, one of the many troubles is that it's like the proverbial onions skins that the more you talk about one principle, the more surely the next six principles poke their head up.
Yes, the
Because
deeper the layers go.
everything in layers and layers and layers, and in interrelation and interrelation again. So it is very hard to explain how uh, during especially judging and teaching, how one has to within seconds select the peeling of the onion in the right direction and with the right responses. So the first and foremost would be always for riders who eventually, hopefully, will be teachers, who eventually, hopefully, will become judges and excel in all these things because you actually know the subject. You don't just hack around and try to reinvent the fashion of the week or the fashion of the month. You actually know what the devil you talk about, and you can then unload that in a nice way. So, so I think the first, the obvious problem with this mentoring and tutoring life is that we don't teach right at the beginning the language of what we use. So there used to be in all
Yes.
sciences and all arts a language of its own. So when you said impulsion, everybody understood something, and it was not in a factory. And then you say forward zest, and you talk about nothing that rabbits do. They talk about horses. So there's a special language, and people seem to not to understand or been instructed to know it. And it is the number one layer of horrible mistakes, of disorientation, and teaching uh, like that forever problem of forward, more forward,
Right,
more
right.
forward. What the devil, more forward? And it's not enough. It's not enough. But the only thing not enough is money in the bank. But everything else can be quickly enough.
Yeah.
And then it should be explained what forward means. And it has nothing to do with speed. And yet, and speed is the great ruiner of the horse's gaits and balance. It is, of course, the next layer in the onion is to remind again uh, the audience today that that in our art there's no neutrality. You either do it right or you destroy the horse and the art that you
Sure.
inherited. So there's no pardon. There's no, I tried my best. Students who used to say that to me in philosophy class, I always said, if this was your best, keep it a secret. It is just incredible, shabby, terrible thing. And so it is with our great art of the equitation, the classical equitation that we inherited, that we have to become a priesthood who uphold with zealousy and purity the great art we inherited.
Yeah.
So the problem beyond these thousands of principles and all the details in their in these principles, the problem is that people, when teach it, don't form it into a comprehensive, interrelated body of knowledge. Because we were always told that this art and other arts in our civilization are very much dependent on knowledgeable, systematic, and gradual transmission of it. So if it's not systematically transit and you know little things like we do today is as wonderfully useful as possible, it's still a cup of water in the ocean. It's
Yes.
it's nothing compared to what is dammed up behind us.
Right.
And so the principle of forward and the principles uh, of evenness and straightness and all the things we deal with almost needs a daily explanation and definition. You cannot say anymore, these modern writers, uh,
Oh, sure.
I want more, because you have to first of all explain, don't run off. I
Yeah.
want a lot more, but let me explain what I call more, and
Mhm.
then you imitate. So,
And more of what, right? I think it's great the way you talked about it, the word that you used, the disorientation. I think
yes,
there's so much
yes,
this challenge that, like you're saying here, and I love that
yeah,
we're starting with this idea of the terminology,
yes,
the the kind of need to translate, right? For having
yes,
personal translation of these words
yes,
does seem to have created so many different paths and so many writers
yes,
that have become disoriented, and so things don't mean what they should oftentimes.
yes. And therefore, some of these principles, we are beginning to lose. We are actually losing some.
Hmm.
Very importantly, the idea of engagement. It's
Okay. Yeah.
amazing that they are engaged. Nobody. So my one of my complaints is, so to speak, a lack of engagement nowadays in riding, in training, and in competition equally. Engagement is should be available or pursued from day one of the green horse going evergreen. It still needs to be asked or tutored on is uh, the, not just impulsion and forward energy, but all engagement. So major blocks of things that in riding academies were the matter of 4 years of conversation and training,
Hmm.
returning over and over again the importance of engagement and how you could better it on the greenest 3-year-old stallion, because now, of course, everything is put into the pyramid, which is, of course, in my opinion, a very inadequate way of talking about the real things. And so, um, uh, this this there should be a regular schooling and a regular requirement that riders come to your lesson with a horse who doesn't want to be trained or mistreated, because you don't know the theory of what impulsion is and what forward energy is, etc., etc.
Hmm.
And then,
Can we talk about those specifically for a
yes,
moment? We've
yes,
mentioned impulsion, forward, and engagement, and we've put a lot of stress on
yes.
the engagement. So how would we define engagement?
It's coming right now out of my vocabulary here. So so first of all, we have to know what are the goals of our riding.
Okay.
And the first immediate goal is longitudinal flexion, without which the horse is in pain, more or less pain and discomfort, and is in the process of breaking down.
Hmm.
So now we have a veterinarian, we have now a problem that goes beyond theory and cuts into our responsibility to treat an animal into an easy and painless life. So first of all, the great principle is you have to change, have to teach the horse ways in which he moves under the alien weight of a rider. And to this, the first step is longitudinal flexion,
Okay.
so that you put the horse into an elastic mode, so that his motion over territory is not stressful, but easy and with minimum correct aids, but minimum aids, he can produce maximum engagement of the joints and the musculature. So there is the first and foremost goal of riding, that the horse is tutored in how to reach the correct posture, without which there should be no transportation. Don't drive a horse, don't shoulder in a horse, don't bother a horse, because first the posture before there is transportation.
Mhm.
And like when you examine a teacher working in the arena to give them a diploma and a certification, I would ask for that. Start working. I want to see how you value the flexion and the posture of the horse beyond before you bother him with a rein back or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, perfect. So
So,
this longitudinal flexion,
right,
this
and
length
that's
bend of the body, right? Because any
right,
movement, as you're saying, no transportation without the longitudinal flexion.
right,
Any
because
movement beyond that is just inversion, and it's going to be jamming the joints. Yeah.
absolutely. And this longitudinal flexion contains everything that is in the famous impression of the horse is on the aids, because
Okay.
this is how the horse first understands and submits to this horizontal flexion, submits to it because he recognizes its value of painless, easy life without inhibitions.
Mhm.
So then you say, okay, now we know, but put it into words of what is then the goal. The goal of riding is simply to replace the clumsy work of a horse uh, in the freedom of a corral, replace that with cultured, knowledgeable work of the same horse who now can do things easier, yet with more impact on his development. And what we want to develop, and here come the 1, 2, we develop in the horse the latent talents of gymnastic uh, profusion, that he can display all of this and use a time span of evolution to make it possible. The correct training can bring this up in anywhere between 3 to 6 years, and that is the program. So the program should be clear in a rider's head. It's not a gold medal. That's not why we ride. We ride to make the horse possible to his freedom under the weight of the rider. And therefore, we have three things to do that can be all the time, not like the pyramid. Oh, number 6 in the pyramid is contact. Number 7 is, a happy wiggle. No, we don't have any of that nonsense. From day 1 to the day last, you are to have collection, engagement, and suppleness. Suppleness is changeability,
Mhm.
flexibility, uh, maneuverability, changeability foremost at all. You have to have a horse from 3-year-old, nobody already, you work on supple. Yeah, working on his suppleness is completely different than a Grand Prix horse's suppleness.
Sure.
But you know that it's knowledgeable and, of course, organized knowledge rider. You reach the pinnacle of your. Then, of course, you have to know that beyond these three things are, of course, three things you also have to do in your daily lessons, daily vocabulary. I think I mentioned that before, but not to the same audience. So, anyway, first of all, we have to do therapeutic work. So, the therapy is to establish and improve the purity of gaits under the rider in perfect balance. So now we have a pure wild horse on the meadow. That's not for us. We need to reestablish the balance and the purity of the gait in uh, in our therapeutic work. And the next one is, of course, uh, um, what I didn't say it right because the next one is the therapeutic work. This one was the rehabilitation of the purity of gait and balance. So correct your notes if you have
Yeah.
made any
Yeah.
notes. So the rehab is followed by, of course, the building of the horse that is ambidextrous.
Okay.
So it is a therapeutic work of constantly creating straightness and knowing the meaning of uh, um, what is it called, uh, well, the straightness of the horse as defined, the spinal alignment on the exact pattern on which he moves. So we straighten the horse on a 20-meter circle into uh, a straight horse by bending him onto the 20-meter circle. So straightness is not referred to as geometric straightness, except in some places center line in the trot or something, but it's a functional straightness what we want. And then the last glory of all this work, which goes, by the way, simultaneously, the glory of this work is that you can then go to gymnastic work. So finally, with perpetual attention to balance and therapy and so on, you arrive at gymnasium where strength and skill are pursued. You have to know from A to Z what are your strengthening exercises and when and why, and what are your uh, gymnastic, sort of the valid exercises to ambidexterity. And you have to know whether the left hind leg needs strengthening or the right does. And you have to know whether the crookedness of your horse is happening at the shoulder and not at the hips or what else. And you have to accordingly come up with your protocols of what your daily work will be. So it is extremely scientific and sort of obligatory. The same thing is with the second very important principle is collection. And everybody screaming that collection is the ninth block of the pyramid. Forget about the pyramid. It's a lot of dead bodies in Egypt. And the pyramid has nothing to do with you. So what you have to pay attention is that all collection has great value. Um, Collection is anytime you shift some weight, some center of gravity backwards towards the haunches.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm. And this idea of collection, we hear riders talk about self-carriage, right? And
Yeah,
self-carriage under the weight of the rider
yes,
in itself is a piece of collection, right?
yes,
Because the rider being on the horse alone lends the horse to being on the forehand.
yes,
So we have
yes,
to shift that weight back just to find the original balance, if we could call it that.
yes, yes. So you said it very, very well. And that's one of the many skins of that onion that we have to unskin. But this is exactly it. It's a very complex system. But if you don't know the definition of collection,
Mhm.
or you can produce it. So
Sure.
we know that collection needs ambidexterity, and we have to simultaneously work on both. Yes, I want you ambidextrous, but then I want you anchor back into your hocks
Mhm.
and and so on. And then you bring on simultaneously 3, 4 principles that are interrelated in our mind. We know the role of each one of those principles, but now you pursue the collection. So finally, when collection and engagement and therapeutic straightness and everything has been worked on, 6 years later, your horse is winning the Grand Prix, not because you rode a nice Grand Prix, but because you were peeling the onion for 6 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you got it so right, and the result is so right that then now you have it.
You mentioned the other day, and I love that we've had so many chances recently to chat, but you mentioned the other day playing the 3 knobs with
Yes.
your horse, right? Bent and straight, long and short, left and right. Those
Right.
3 knobs that we're constantly adjusting as a way of strengthening, suppling,
Yes.
all of that, developing the horse
Yes.
into the partner that we're looking for.
So you can ride, finally, you can ride your horse and not the test. Because people are trying to, oh, the test says medium trot on the diagonal. Forget it. You have 3 knobs and you use the faucets. One is there, and second is there, third. So exactly what you are saying is the daily vocabulary of training of a horse. But then there are the other concepts all mixed into what we already mentioned or named, the idea of the impulsion and the ideas of the, collection impulsion, but related to this is, and it will come up later. It doesn't seem to belong to exactly here. So, okay, so when riders know these principles, they can work. But here comes one of the most difficult concepts.
Okay.
And that is to know the ideals which we want to reach, but never will.
But
so
never
we
will,
work
sure.
towards ideals that we will never see, experience, and understand fully, except that these are ideals. So that they are not even possible to achieve and understand because you are trying to achieve ideals. But then why do you need to do that? Because everything you do in your daily work needs the compass that gives direction to your movement. And I think we said something about this in the past already, but I still have to repeat here that the ideal is definition is maybe 32 specifics. And people who misjudge or misteach or misjudge and simply give a Piaf an 8 or a Passage a 7 or something, they haven't for some reason understood the ideal. As you should see, if in the Piaf there are 39 things to be conscious of, but if you see that the most important of the 39, such as lowering of the haunches to elevate the entire forehand, including the entire rib cage, if that itself is missing, you should already hear the whistle blowing that this cannot be an 8. This cannot be it's not even a Piaf yet. It's an application, but it's not a Piaf. But if you don't know these 39 features, what are you judging? For God's sakes, what are you judging? Because so many riders come back and say, oh my God, my horse didn't do a thing. He kind of ringed the tail and shifted his weight a little bit, but he never did a Piaf, and look, I got an 8 on it. Well, sorry about that, but this should be very strongly informed in programs of making good teachers and making good judges.
Mhm.
They
How does
sh-
this happen, Charles, that we see that happening in the judging? I mean, it's not like the role to get a judge's card in the dressage arena is a very short thing. It's a long process. There seems to be quite a bit involved with that. So how does that seem to happen?
Nobody is teaching the ideals and the pinnacles. Nobody understands what a rein back is. I
Okay.
hate the term, so
Sure.
we can say the backing of the horse
Hmm.
or the rein back in the horse. They don't understand that it has to be, diagonal footprints and not parallel and on and on. And it has
Hmm.
to be on the bit and not behind the bit with an overflexed neck to pull him in. And so all these things should be known to these people going up for examination.
Hmm.
And they should be able to recognize and say, now, this reining back, the horse never lifted the feet up to
Hmm.
rein back, but scraped the
Right.
furrows
Drug the feet
into,
backwards.
yes. So then what should I do? And then the master, a judge who teaches the course should say, this is major because
Hmm.
it makes the difference between satisfactory or unsatisfactory.
Hmm.
That so the grade 4 and 6 are much further away from each other than 7 and 8. 7 and 8 can be very close,
Mm.
but when a rainback is scraping the ground
Hmm.
overflexed in the neck, that's not a rainback. So forget even the 5.
Hmm.
Why shouldn't there be a glorious return of the 4? I used to be
The glorious
judge.
return of the fork.
I,
Sure.
I had a fabulous 5 judges saying, well, and my teacher used to say, not all sideways disobedience is a half pass
Yes.
because he knew exactly that there shouldn't be a half day, uh, you know a disobedience. So this kind of language and ideology that people should come to these things with knowledge,
Hmm.
and this giving riding lessons 20-meter circle and then you yell, I want more, I want more. What the hell do we want from these? And the gates are breaking down, become choppy, become shuffly, lack resist, resilience. They are hammering the floor. They are not suspended above the floor. Um, you, um, I, I keep wondering if I'm repeating myself, but I think what we should worry about that the purity of the gate established under the rider
Hmm.
is literally going to the devil. Our job is actually to improve the gates under the alien rider. So
Hmm.
instead of improving it, we break it down
You break it
and
down.
ruining it. And so the pictures in the magazines show horses trotting with 1 foot on the ground and 3 in the air. That's not a trot.
Right.
That's a third. That's a terrible thing to do, but it's not a trot. But
Right.
the fourth,
Now, do you think that a lot of this is because, it's not only is the riding, we would say not knowledgeable, but then not systematic and gradual because there
right?
may are we pushing for too much too fast
Yeah,
without taking that time? Is that a big piece of that?
that could be one thing, but and not knowing the sequence of exercises, how one does this on a daily basis.
Okay.
And then the other thing that could be responsible to this all the time, confining the horse with the reins. They
Okay.
hang on. They are water skiing. They are hanging on. not, again, contact has not been identified. Contact is something the horse does, not the rider.
Yes, we
What,
receive it, right? We don't take it, we receive
right? And what is the rider doing? The rider presents the bit by stopping the upper torso and the upper arm so that the horse can form the longitudinal flexion by stepping deeper in with the hocks. Deeper in with the hocks gives the horse a rise in the back and a rolling and rounding of the neck muscles.
it.
And once you accepted this, the rein yields 1 centimeter or 1 meter. I don't care. But yield means the tension is cut with a scissor. No tension. It is hanging. And your rein feels and can jiggle the ring of the bit. It's not on the bit. And the horse contacts the bit, not the rider. What is it that he contacts? Not the metal of the bit. He contacts the rider's seat bones with his hind leg. The haunches are allowed to step under the rider's cabinetry and the seat bone. And then the rein has nothing. Then the question is, why do we have reins? Why don't we use a hackamore? What? The Kunffy is so controversial. He says you should never contact the rein. No, you shouldn't. The rein is for us to transfer, to have an extension of the seat bones and the vertical weight of the rider coming down like a plumb line. And that plumb line, I'm here, you step under it, is there for a moment. The horse might play to a little stronger contact. You yield it, one rein, then the second rein, you get him. A horse on the rein feels that he is not on the rein. There's emptiness in your hand. Dr. Klimke said always, the only thing you feel in your hand is the weight of the rein leather. That's all you feel. You don't feel a 9-year-old gelding on the rein. You feel only the loose rein.
Yes.
But how come then he's on the bit? Because that's the definition. On the bit is the acceptance of the longitudinal flexion, which is our number one task. The Tuesday morning we sit on the horse. All you need to do is longitudinal flexion now, not tomorrow, now.
Sure.
So it's the base of the pyramid, not the peak, the top of the pyramid. It's now. And then, of course, you can, the more advanced your horse is gymnastically, the more you can present him in a shorter frame or a longer frame, in a shorter stride or a longer stride. But this forever medium trot, extended trot, which has to overstride footprint of the forehand. Not that they don't overstep it, they understep it. So they go into false collection. They falsify collection because they stiffen and straighten the joints. So when the joints are not working with full freedom, and then that's what you get, the 5-beat trot and the 4-beat canter. Exactly, because of inhibition.
Right, that inhibition. And I love, I don't remember when it was in one of our chats recently, I believe, that you made a comment about the horse should be seeking the bit but never arrive.
Right. Never lean onto it. Never a fifth leg. Exactly. And that's exactly what incorrect riding you see. And but a teacher and a judge should be able to notice it and also verbalize it, say something about it. And you know this forever my horse is pulling my arms out. The answer is there's the horse is complaining that a person is pulling his face out.
Right.
I said, you stop a pulling of the horse by even forward. If
Right.
the rein is hanging loose, he can't pull on you.
That's it. A horse can't lean on a rein that isn't pulling.
No, you have to unpull on it. It's like a rope. You cannot pull a rope that's tied up.
Sure.
So untie the rope, and
Right.
then it will follow you across the riding school.
Yes, yes. It's not tug of war if it's just one side. It's just
Right,
a fellow
right.
dragging a rope, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then the whole concept that then the horse achieves the correct posture and positioning. Um, but there are some other things. Can I go to other things in my notes?
Oh, certainly. Absolutely.
Because if you have questions or so, you should ask me. But or you contribute always very well because you understand very well. Oh, okay. So I have to relate some things to um, philosophy because uh, riding is following kind of uh, philosophical principles that are called the Gestalt principles. So Gestalt is the German word for configuration. Uh, so it means, because I also always emphasize that riding is really a metaphor for life lived correctly. I mean, you find the same principles working in life. So, okay, Gestalt means that there are other components and everything from little screws and big tiles and stuff put out on your driveway in front of your garage. So it's a bunch of debris out there, a couple thousand pieces of things. But if you know how to assemble it, it will make a perfect family cottage. You can build a little cottage of that debris, that's all. The difference between debris or cottage in the forest is your knowledge of Gestalt. How can this combine? So how can you combine a left shoulder in with a right control of the horse's, or you can combine everything that we throw on the. Many of these modern riders and these modern teachers don't have a clue that they are in a Gestalt situation, that they have been putting together the little pieces of the puzzle, and you didn't build a cottage. You ended up with the little pieces that you got yourself one bench, or you ended up that you got yourself whatever, a kitchen stove. So your job in art and in horsemanship is an attention to your, not only just attention, but more like fantasy of what is your gestalt with your horse. How do you want to assemble this horse towards your pinnacle, your ideal? Because there's always the ideal.
Sure.
And what is my ideal? Should I have a little cottage built, or where am I going? And then it tells you in the Gestalt how to assemble and to tell the horse where the two of you are going together. And then another thing is also in philosophy very important, and that is Hegel's dialectics. And of course, I don't like Hegel at all, and I hate most of the things he was advocating or teaching.
Why is that? I'm curious.
Because he was one of these leftist Marxists. I take away all your private property and you will obey me, or I hit you with my whip.
Oh, okay.
He was a
I know
nice.
some trainers that are that way.
Oh yes, I know. Yes,
Trainers and riders.
right. Yeah, and that's very suitable for. But my exception is that his his theory of uh, what, what am I? What am I? I put it to the wrong place. Well, anyway, Hegel's theory of relativity and what he's saying is very easy to understand. He says there's every moment in time when you can sort of almost say stop it for the reason I want to examine it. What the hell is going on?
Mhm.
What is this now? And you must be the most honest, most complete examination of the facts of that time, that moment. And you say, oh, okay, I I am right now really kind of poor and I eat sort of canned food. And immediately to this reality, there is a counter, uh, a power that is trying to resolve it. So the principle gets immediate opposition. And then you say, okay, I have the can to eat and that's terrible. I want to be rich and opulent. So what should I do? Well, let's use as antithesis to canned food is simply rob a bank. And then there will be a result.
Mhm.
I am hungry and desperate, and I rob a bank to feed myself. What's the result? You don't get rich. You don't buy your yacht. You don't live in a 4-bedroom apartment. You go to jail.
Mhm.
And so Hegel's, uh, now I remember the name of Hegel's dialectics.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so his dialectics are completely correct because he advises that you must examine honestly where you are and know where you want to be. So, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. The synthesis is your desire how to get rich, but finding the right way of doing it. So
Mhm.
I am destitute. I don't rob a bank. I don't want to be rich tonight. I want to be rich 5 years from tonight.
Mhm.
And that is going to college, studying something, and then get employed by etc. etc. So you place the thesis, antithesis, synthesis in the right order. He says horrible things happen in life and in horseback riding
Mhm.
because people say, okay, this is the situation and I want a piaffe. So let's stand up the whip and slap him
Right.
right and left 16 times. He's going to piaffe in the corner like heaven.
Right. Right. So
So
they're robbing the bank
that's right.
basically to get
Yeah,
that immediate
robbing,
gratification. Yeah.
exactly. Instant gratification, not the long, because for the long time it works, but you have to know how to place these units in. And you see how it relates to the Gestalt too,
Mhm.
because Hegel was also talking about the second step is the most important, not the first step that tells you the truth.
Mhm. Mhm.
Second step is the most important, there where you want to be a correct list of what you can do. So you get the third one, which is a millionaire with a big yacht.
Mhm.
And, and that's the end of, that's how you build a cottage in the Gestalt system.
Yeah.
So in two
So he's
philosophical,
making a list. He's got going back to the Gestalt idea of the pile of pieces, right?
right,
He's then making a list of the pile of pieces
right,
so that he can organize them and create that cottage. So it
yeah,
doesn't look more like a yard sale out in the front yard or something, but it's
yeah,
actually something put together systematically on purpose and
yes,
in the direction of the vision.
yes. very well said and very well formulated, because that's how it is. And of course, in all of our lives, we are constantly, you know, me too, uh, thesis, whatever it was, uh, counter thesis. Um, I said, I'll teach classical horsemanship. What if I would have said, I'm going to be a concert pianist? What if I, you know,
Mhm.
why, why this? And so then comes the synthesis. Oh my God, this is decades of teaching, and people are still shortening the rein and standing in the stirrups. Oh my God, what more? I should go back to Hegel and say, give my money back. You taught me, you taught me the most horrible thing. I was doing counter thesis forever the wrong way. So it's good when you teach to have these are methods. These are methods with which you can get to the mind of your student
Mm.
and so on. And
Yes.
they are very important to know. So okay, so I wondered if do you want to talk about engagement or the
Yeah,
con?
I would love that. We've got actually a question that came in live. If you don't
Yeah,
mind, Charles, I'd love to get to this question. I think
yeah,
it's great. Going back to that idea of knowing what we want in the horse, right?
yeah,
Or knowing what we want from the horse, the
yeah,
cottage, right? Our
yeah.
cottage in our mind. The question came in from Ginger, and she asks, how do we inspire riders to pursue the components when they don't know it's available? If they've never felt a straight horse in self carriage, what inspires a fundamental novice rider to pursue the horse's balance toward longevity?
Well, this is, of course, the most difficult part of teaching this great art, because it's based on a human being, body, mind, and soul. And so to inspire the mind and soul, which are so mysterious, because still nobody knows the location of the mind. And of course, you don't know the location of the soul either. Otherwise, I would ask you to drive me there so we can shake hands or something.
Perfect,
But
right?
yeah, but but you don't know where it is, and I don't know where it is. And so to inspire uh, students to be mindful of him being really a triplicate. We are not just the body, the sport of riding. That's just our vocabulary. That's just our language. It's not where we are. And to stimulate the sensitivities towards the academic and the spiritual self is, of course, very difficult. But without it, great arts derailed and died. Great painters and sculptors all moved in and lived with the master that was teaching
Mhm.
them and tutoring them. And so, with this slow day after day contact and mutually witnessing one's life and the other's life at
Mhm.
the same life together, this all awakens our interest of, wait a minute, are we, you know, and of course, we believed that classical riding was very building of virtues and improved and increased the virtue contents of each rider.
Mhm.
And that's why young people were handed over to riding schools or officers training to be raised up by the art of riding.
Mhm.
So it's been systematically transmitted like that, that
Mhm.
it was from, uh, uh, from the young to the more mature with the available insights
Mhm.
into uh, the other dimensions of life. And
Right.
yes, it's missing because the academies are missing. If you don't have an academic program somewhere, you can't really teach these because
Mhm.
the daily influence and validity disappears.
Right.
Yeah, it's very sad because that's what worries me, that, if are we heading towards that terrible point when any minute we can accept, the 5 beat trot and the 3 beat and 4 beat canter, then no, thank you, no, thank you.
Mhm.
Let
Right.
me,
Right.
let me out of the loony bin. I don't want to, you know, because we have to ask each student to dedicate themselves to the, because it should be, as I said, like a priesthood, because it should be so emotion based and principle based.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and going towards the ideals. What is it in the terms of priests? Ideal is the heaven. So that's an idea. So describe me heaven.
Right.
Nobody can, because nobody has been there that
Right.
we
That's
know.
that's the
Have been,
10, right?
yeah. So you just have to tell them that. And of course, on the flip side of it is that if there would not be mysteries to our life, but we would know at the beginning already in the cradle, how will it end? Uh, you know, uh, my goodness, one wouldn't think it's worth living.
Right.
Let me off. I know how it ends. Oh,
Right. Right.
really? Yes, I
Yeah.
do. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just 3 years old, but I already know it all.
I've got it sorted. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
but I don't know if I answered this lady's a very nice question.
Well, I think you did do a great job of touching on it. There is how do we inspire the riders to pursue those components when they don't know that they're available? And I'm reminded of the conversation that we just had the other day. And I definitely I want to take this as a moment to recommend to all of our listeners that if they aren't aware yet of your books and your website, your salon, that they take a minute to check that out. But in the discussion that we had just recently on chapter 5
Yeah,
in your book, and actually have it sitting here with me, The Ethics and Passions of Dressage. It's available in print and as an audio. We talked about the diversification and how important that is, and the idea of riding several horses, and not having, as you said, not having the school or the academies in the way that we once did.
yeah,
It's challenging because a rider may go through their entire riding life and only ride one or two horses, not
yeah,
having the opportunity
mm,
to ride several horses.
yeah,
um, and it's one of the things that until this COVID idea, I was wintering in Spain and Portugal, taking groups of riders over there to ride higher level horses where they could, in one day they may sit on two or three different horses, and in the span of a week they may have ridden 8 different horses
yeah,
that have all been trained to a higher level. So then
yeah,
they can take that home and know when they climb on their horse what some of those feelings are, right, that they're aiming
yes,
for. And
yes,
it does seem to be ever increasingly difficult to find that opportunity for riders. And this is where I think it's so fantastic that you've been kind of as a theoretical academy
yeah,
going through your books recently, chapter by chapter, and kind of dissecting each chapter. And I've been really honored, Charles, and thank you again for allowing me to be a part of that for a couple of your books now in several chapters. I think that's a great way for riders, at least in the theoretical side of things,
yes,
to realize, hey, there's something more out in the pasture there or in the arena than maybe what I've been asking for.
yes, and that it is really a dialogue. We don't just we talk to the horse, but the horse answers, and it's by being on the back of a horse with a good academic preparation, a
Mhm.
good understanding of all these principles and all these dimensions, you
Mhm.
get much more out of the feelings what the horse gives you, and so that it becomes much more a dialogue than just a monologue
Mm.
and in riding. And that's all we can do, because the way we teach and go about it with clinics and things is really, um, I mean, sad to say, in a way, it's kind of impossible to, we are lucky to have you and other people who put in the energy and did some studying to, to not to let that end of riding uh, die.
Mhm.
But there are still people with principles and with understandings of how to make it right or how to make it wrong. I think that's, yeah, I kind of hang on to those of my students or acquaintances that I know are, they know enough that they teach, um, well, they teach knowledge
Mhm.
rather than some humdrum nonsense.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Going back to
but
the robbing of the bank analogy, right?
yes,
I
I,
think about that. And I love that you used that as an analogy. I find that's one that I use myself frequently when I'm working with riders, not necessarily the robbing the bank, but I'm always talking to them about that what they're building with their horse is a bank account.
yes,
And they're either making a deposit or they're taking a withdrawal,
right,
right?
right.
And are they taking the withdrawal with enough in the account that they don't
Yes, that
overdraw
it's
it?
covered, that they
Yeah,
don't overdraw.
exactly.
But very good analogy. You can certainly drive the idea home, and I mean, everybody would understand that. But about my books, I want to tell is that I have now only 5 that are in print,
Okay.
because there used to be 7, but some are no longer uh,
Mm.
revived or anything. So there are only 5 of mine. And yeah, and I'm glad when you said to maybe look at my what is it called? My uh,
Oh, the
book,
website and the
the
salon.
website. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that would be. But how about any other questions from you?
Let's see. It looks like those
Mhm.
that's the question that has come in. A lot of great comments on here. And I love Ginger followed up and she says that's all we can do is have that dialogue, you know.
Yeah,
And I think that is so great. That dialogue also, the way that you described it, I think is important. Maybe that we can touch on that for just a moment as well. And I'm going to sneak to a chapter in your book here, The Ethics and Passions of
yeah.
Dressage. See if I can find where I earmarked here.
Mhm.
Chapter 8 that you have on non-confrontational horsemanship. I
Yes,
really love that. And again, the robbing of the bank, right? Kind of keeps
yes,
coming up. I really love, I've got so much of it outlined and highlighted and things like that. But a line in here, only those training means are acceptable which are non-confrontational. And I
yeah,
feel like that's so worth chatting about. No force should be applied to gain phony obedience. I
right.
really, really love that line. Um, uh, I'm thinking so often that I want acceptance above obedience, right?
Yes, yes,
So that we have that understanding in there because we can
yeah,
be obedient, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be accepting of it. And then we'll lose suppleness. We'll lose that engagement if we've got just
yeah,
the kind of the militant obedience,
yes.
right?
Well, that's the wrong kind of obedience, but
Mm-hmm.
because it should be um, a voluntary surrendering of the genetic uh, promptings and exchanging it into a learned process
Mm-hmm.
from the rider. And yeah, and that's a very big accomplishment. The the so-called taming of the horse. And by the way, dressage, the French word dressage, really implies training and taming. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a double meaning in dressage, because people never ask, what does it mean?
What
The
is right?
dressage. That's what it means. Yeah. So but I think that when we talk about these things, is very useful to build up the theoretical knowledge. I wanted to see if there's any other of the systems here. Um, no, that's not necessary. So training is by rewarding. I used to always insist on that. Anytime the horse does what we asked for, we touch him with a full fist holding the rein. You still can touch the horse and reassure him that he got it right.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's all part of that ideology.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's amazing how much the horse will do for a simple thank
yeah,
you, isn't it?
yes, yes. And on releases, and it's the same thing. The horse that doesn't take the left lead canter. So then I say full yield, right rein. So full yield, of course, pushing straight forward with straight elbow, and then come back softly, and the horse immediately strikes the left lead canter.
Yes.
There's not even a question, because if you say it clearly, uh, they feel it, and they can do what you ask. Yes,
Yes.
it's as all great art, it's so intriguing. There's not one boring day when you ride horses.
So very true. So
Yeah,
very true. So we've got a couple requests additionally on here now, asking if we can get into that discussion of engagement. I think that'll be
yeah,
great if you feel like now's a good time for that.
yes. Yes. Well, first of all, I can make it uh, succinct, and then it's easier to understand. Uh, but okay. The problem with some of these terminologies is that they have multiple meanings, and engagement is one of the most multiple we can get to. It has three different meanings depending on how you use it.
Okay.
So you are trotting on a 20-meter circle, and it's kind of poking around, and the teacher says, now wake him up, now let's give him sort of a hot-footed low. Let's see that he's anxious to get a little jazzy and suspended, and then you do something for that, and the horse kind of wakes up and moves. Wonderful, you engaged him. So
Ah.
there's engagement to agitate the energy of the haunches, which is where energy comes from.
Mhm.
You agitate the energy without running off. It's the eternal engaged horses do not run. So when people say more, and faster, it's nonsense. An obedient horse, of course, immediately understands that activity, but don't get excited, don't run off. Then the second meaning of engagement is that we recognize that each exercise we train in or exhibit for the judge to, to measure our accomplishment, everything like that has a central point, a message, an all important usefulness. So we say, okay, uh, and then we can say half pass right. So the horse goes sideways, not enough. Goes crossing the leg a little bit, not enough. This and that, and no body bending, no neck positioning. It's not really half pass. Why? Because the half pass is the quintessential hip, uh, for the hip development and strengthening and suppling. It's all about the hip, and it's terribly important because it's almost the only one that speaks directly for strengthening and the skill at the hips. And the horse has to, of course, do the X with the legs, not just cross, which means hoof to hoof crossing, but it should uh, go past it and form an X. So the two hips are pulled inward and downward into the horse's pelvis. So
Okay.
it's an incredibly important, but it has to be, and the more it exaggerates the important part of that exercise, the more it's engaged. So if it's crossing like this, wonderful, you got a 6, but now it's crossing like this, plus airborne with a huge floating movement. Oh yes, now it's 9,
Okay.
because what it's all about. Did you reward that the neck is positioned? No. Did you reward that the haunches are uh, still equally high, only the legs cross? Not enough. So you measure the entire concept of uh, of engagement, not just that it does what it's supposed to, but how excellently it does
Hmm.
what it's supposed to.
Okay.
Again, for instance, halt and always first posture, position, then ground. So we halt and we say left lead canter. And if it's proper, from the lumbar back of the horse, and the first movement is a tuck of the pelvis to raise the withers up, well engaged. If it's running off with the neck stiffened and the tilted head, the left ear lower than the right ear, well, then it's disengaged.
Hmm.
That's not an engaged departure from halt to canter. So, okay, so doing better is engagement, doing the part of the collection, part of the movement that gives us the results, the value,
Hmm.
and then the third one is when the horse can maintain the high value and doesn't quit it. And that it's often called, also called self-carriage. So self-carriage goes through an elevation. First, just don't pull on my arm.
Hmm.
And second is, do the movement engaged enough that it looks like the exercise. And number three is when the horse maxes out and does the exercise as best as it can be. And that comes back to the concept of, do you know the ideal? Do
Right.
you know where we are going?
Right.
And
Right.
then
And
you
have you
know,
been systematic and
like,
gradual in the process of
yeah.
developing? Hmm.
And have you observed that in some movements he's giving us great engagement, and in others he stiffens the joints and open a straight leg and refuses to step under. And instead of lowering the croup, the croup is bouncing higher in a nervous gesture with
Hmm.
stiff joints. It's important to know the feeling of your seat, but also the visual of how it looks when the horse impacts on the ground with a foot, because the impacting foot should sink towards the floor.
Hmm.
So the impacting in the piaffe, there's a nice seated piaffe. The horse is lowering his hocks towards the ground. So it's not just watching how hectic he is upward,
Hmm.
leaving the ground, but how about landing? He
Right.
has
So
to
the
land.
absorption of the joints.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And it should be more important for engagement than the actual butt bouncing height in the hind end.
Sure. Right.
So it's the lowering of the structure, not
Hmm.
bouncing.
Yeah, and
So,
I think it's it's important for riders to also be aware that in what we're talking about here, the stiff-legged movement
yeah,
versus the sinking joints, the
yeah,
absorbing movement there, they're working two different muscles in that case, right? The movement, the more forward idea, right? The more forward
yeah.
muscles
Mhm.
versus the balancing muscles,
Yes.
those deeper intrinsic muscles,
Mhm.
where the real core strength comes from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a very important. And then, of course, another thing is um, part of this, what we talk about now, the engagement, because it's the horse is sinking towards the ground is a measure of strength or a test of strength, because we have to build not just the skills to do a piaffe or something, but the strength where horses are not lowering their haunches sometimes because they're simply too weak. They're not
Right.
prepared to piaffe. I mean, they cannot sink down, and they will not until you make it much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these principles. There was one question in another recording I had here that had not exactly about the sinking, but about the back. And again, we have so many exercises that we should know and why we do them. But for the back, the most important set of exercises are from gait to gait change. So, for instance, I ask a lot for that. Uh, Give me 4 steps of canter, left lead, and then back to trot, as many steps as you need to organize your feeling of suppleness and energy. And then 4 steps of canter, back to trot, 4 steps of canter. And you just think canter, you think trot, canter, trot, canter. It just becomes softer, softer, more elastic. If you do uh, the no change in the gaits, but in the same gait, a longer trot, shorter trot, or a canter extend for 2 strides and then return to school canter, schooling the canter. So within the movement, then you talk about the strength of the joints and the limbs.
Mm.
So there's a big difference.
Yes.
And also I keep telling that, shoulder in, fine for the hocks and the shoulders, but shoulder out is an energizer. It
Yes.
is not for it accesses more the stifle than the hocks, and it results in an explosion of energy. And you can teach the horse to do that. Haunches out, coil him. Then when you are at the diagonal, uh, gun it forward. Let the cork go out of the champagne. It just has to go and ups in the long undulating, huge long steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah. So if it's within the movement, completely different value than if it's from different movement into a different movement.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very so all of those are important training, um, not training secrets, but understandings of
Mm-hmm.
engagement and strength and skill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as you said, understanding the exercises, knowing the
Right,
value that they bring to the horse, and
right,
systematically where and when do we want
yeah,
to put those in?
yeah. Well, also back to diversification and so many of these things that we need to think about. I always heard I was in 3-day event team, and so I heard a lot of complaints from various ages of students that we also taught that the horse pulls my arms out and I can't. I I would say, why are you warming up for your dressage test? 60 minutes. I said, you take the bloom off the horse. You should have, you warm up with a figure of 8 for 3 minutes, and you should just go in when the whistle
Mm.
blows. I mean, this is what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
horse has to
Oftentimes
be
riders
kept.
will use the body up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we wear him out. He
Mm-hmm.
said even that he would always say, "No, I have to wear him out, or he just jerks me around and around." I said, "No way." But I I had I had to ride the full course, the 26-kilometer course, and my horse was stronger than a monster,
Mm.
as strong as I think he could have, just broken out of the stable by going through the walls. He was very strong, never pulled on me, nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely nothing. I had the dressage test, which then was St. George. We just had to
Okay.
write the St. George test.
Uh-huh.
And feather light, I mean, there was absolutely nothing. And next day, the steeplechase, where he went like a monster and absolutely no. So, I never could understand why people say they have to wear down the horse
Right.
because he's pulling them. I mean, what kind of a training is that?
Yeah. Well, and I think that can be rather telling of the difference between education and subjugation,
Yes.
right, of the horse.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
well,
that's why.
this is great, Charles. I want to again take an opportunity to recommend that folks take a look at your website, find your books through your website there. As you said, you have 5 of them right now
Yes,
that are
five
still in
right
print.
now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And they can find those through your website.
Yes.
Also, the salon and a listing of your clinics, not only on your website, but also on your Facebook page. And as I understand it, there are still some live stream replays from the clinics at JJ's place. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Available?
yes.
I think that's a great opportunity for folks that may not be able to make it to a clinic live in person with you. Having those live stream replays, I think,
Yes.
is a really fantastic resource.
Yes. And there are the horses and riders that make it so easily visible. What we talk about is so, yeah, that's a good thing to watch.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I mean, well, I think we're scheduled to talk for at least a week solid here, right? We're
Oh,
not we're not
yes, but don't we have one on Sunday? We have a
Yeah,
meeting
yeah.
Sunday.
So we're booked also for Sunday, and that discussion is going to be in my discussion group. So to a smaller audience there, and we're going to be focused more specifically on the diversification for
Yes.
riders and horses, and I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Well, Charles, it's always great fun getting the opportunity to talk with you and have you share your insight and your wisdom with my listeners and myself. I thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you for inviting, and I'm delighted that I can do this with you because, yes, we are on the same mind,
Mm.
and we can really help the direction of this art. We don't have to lose it.
Right. So I guess maybe as a closing here, Charles, what would be something on this idea of the living art and our goal of not losing this living art? What would you say is something that our listeners out there can do or think about to help preserve this art?
Well, I really think that it can be done only with academies and formal schooling because the peer group being a companion to in knowledge to learn with another group of people is very important and unfortunately nobody seems to have an ambition to make an academy because it's not producing enough revenues and so on. But that's the only thing that would make a big difference or put it back to where it was just 50 years ago and before. So my bad news is that we have to do with what we have, which is like discussions like this
Mhm.
and clinics and good teachers and good judges influencing and guiding people, but in this modest circumstance of here and there a clinic or here and there a couple of hours.
Mhm.
And it's not enough. It really isn't.
Right.
It's a
Right.
much bigger territory. And yeah, I mean, we will just have to settle our mind into that. We will do our best not to let it get corrupted and become cruel or become ridiculous. We don't make fun of it. We take it seriously. And
Yes.
yeah, well,
Right. Well, and I like, this idea in between the clinics and that sort of thing. I
yeah,
love. I'm always telling folks again. I'll go back to the book, The Ethics and Passions of Dressage.
yeah,
Not only that, but also the other lectures that we have here, your salon, a lot of the dissection of each chapter of several of your books, being able in between lessons, in between clinics, to kind of consume that content by listening. I know this Ethics and Passions book, I've listened to it. I can't tell you how many times as I'm driving from one clinic to the next, or,
but
uh,
how do you get this listening? Because I never see that book. And is it somewhere on Amazon.com?
I believe I purchased it through your publisher as a downloadable audiobook. I
Oh,
somehow I got it somewhere, and I know
yeah,
it's you reading the book.
yeah,
But it's been priceless to be able to listen to that over and
yeah,
over and really absorb,
yeah. Well, good to know because I'm going to ask him, but I never, I never saw it, and I was supposed to
Okay.
because I'm the reader, right? So
Yes,
I
yes, you
get
are.
to see the product at the end.
Well, it's
I
a
don't-
great listen for sure.
Yes. Well,
Oh,
thank you
perfect.
for mentioning it, and that helps some people discover it where it is.
Yes, good. It will help you discover where it is as well.
That will be a boon to me. And maybe by Sunday I can do it. But Sunday we have a morning session, I think.
Yes, yes. I think I have it set as noon my time here or something like that. So
Oh
it'll be
no,
an earlier morning session for you.
don't scare me, Patrick. It has to be earlier. It was earlier.
I think with our time distant or our time difference, it was earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that's
perfect.
good.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you again so much, Charles, and
Thank
I
you.
will see you again very soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Bye.
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 Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Talking About Horses with Patrick King. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review and subscribe. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit pkhorsemanship.com. We'll catch you next time.